We all know the Minotaur, Medusa, and other popular creatures from Greece, and although Rome has very similar beings, we also find very peculiar and little-known creatures. In this video, we will discover creatures from Roman mythology that almost nobody knows about. Number 1. Strix. The Strix is not a typical bird. It's like the creepiest owl you can imagine. But it's not only a master of night flight. It also has a particular taste for blood, especially that of the innocent. According to ancient Roman stories, the Strix would come out at night in search of unsuspecting babies and children to suck their blood. But the Strix is not just a story to scare children and keep them indoors when the sun goes down. Its legend has deep roots in Roman mythology, reflecting the fear of the unknown, the dark, and the vulnerability of the young. Moreover, this being was not just a monster of the shadows, it was linked to witchcraft and black magic. You don't only have to worry about a bloodthirsty bird, but also about the possibility of it transforming into a person during the day. The Romans had their own methods to combat this menace and other evil creatures: amulets, spells, rituals, protective inscriptions. They spared no resources when it came to keeping the Strix at bay and ensuring that their homes were a safe haven from dark forces. Number 2. Croda. The Croda is a wild creature, which is said to possess a combination of several animals, such as the wolf and the lion. According to ancient texts, it is a beast of great strength, a born predator whose roar could leave you shaking with fear, and the creepiest thing about the creature is its ability to imitate the human voice. This creature could listen to the conversations of humans and then replicate their voices to lure unwary people to isolated locations and ambush them. Imagine hearing the voice of a family member or friend calling out to you only to discover that this deadly being is the one luring you to your doom. This creature is not only a hunter in the physical sense, it is also a hunter of souls, playing with our minds and luring us out of our safety. Aside from its terrifying vocal ability, its skin is impenetrable, a natural armor against arrows and swords. This trait makes it invulnerable in battle. The Croda lives in the distant and exotic lands on the edges of the known world. Number 3. Lemur. The Lemur are beings from the afterlife that show the ancient Romans' beliefs about death, the afterlife, and the spirit of the ancestors. Unlike the heroes and deities of Roman mythology, the Lemur are the restless spirits of the dead, those who have not found peace after their death. And what could the Romans do to keep these spirits from hanging around and causing trouble? They had a festival called Lemuria. Imagine the scene. It's night, everything is dark, and the head of the family gets up, takes off his sandals and starts walking around the house, throwing black beans over his shoulder. Apparently, Lemur loved broad beans, or so the Romans thought. All this while the paterfamilias recites some magic words to make the spirits go away and leave the living in peace. The Lemur were not just to frighten children and stop them from misbehaving. It had many deeper meanings. It was a way of reminding everyone how important it was to respect the dead, to do the right rituals, and to maintain a good relationship with the afterlife. The Romans believed that if you lived a good life and were sent off properly, all would be well after death. If not, you could end up wandering around like a lemur, and no one wanted that. Number 3. Abaron. The Abaron, according to stories of antiquity, lived in a place so remote that not even the most adventurous of Roman or Greek explorers could have reached it. We are talking about a hidden valley in Mount Emmaus, which many today associate with the Himalayan region or Central Asia. But what makes the Abaron noteworthy is not where they lived, but what they looked like. Their feet were said to be upside down, heels forward and toes backwards. Imagine for a second trying to walk like that. It sounds complicated, doesn't it? But for the Abaron, this was no impediment. On the contrary, they were known for their incredible speed, able to run through their mountain valley faster than you and I could run in our best trainers. Number 5. Panati. The Panati are not creatures of Roman mythology in the traditional sense. Their origin is to be found in ancient writers' accounts of exotic peoples and creatures that supposedly inhabited the far reaches of the known world. The Panati are a group of people who, according to the ancients, had ears so large that they reached down to their shoulders. so large that they could use them as blankets to cover themselves at night. The description of the Panati was not only limited to their huge ears, the stories also tell that they lived simple, nomadic lives and were in touch with nature. With those big ears, they would surely listen perfectly when I say, "Hey, subscribe to support me." Not like some people who watch my videos weekly and ignore me, so I have to insist again. They are not going to charge you for subscribing. Neither am I going to get your personal data. That's taken care of by others. Now seriously, thanks to all of you who are supporting me week after week, let's continue. Number 6. Genius Losi. The genius Losi, or the spirit of the place. It's not a mythical creature that you would come across in an enchanted forest, but it is something that could make you feel at peace in that forest, or anywhere. The Romans believed that every place, whether it was a cozy home, a bustling square, or even an entire city, had its own protective spirit. Think of it as a kind of invisible guardian, watching over each place and those who live in it. In your own home, that spirit could be the genius of your family, making sure everyone is safe and happy. In the streets, it would be the protector of the city, maintaining peace and prosperity. And in nature, every tree, every river had its own spirit. In ancient Rome, it was common to have a small altar in your house, a lararium, where you leave offerings and make prayers for that particular genius, hoping for his protection and blessings. The concept also extended to natural landscapes such as forests, springs, rivers, and mountains, each of which was considered to be inhabited by its own protective spirit. Number 7. Monoceros. Although, when you think of Roman mythology, the pantheon gods, fawns, and nymphs come to mind, the unicorn is not far behind. This creature, although not as often mentioned as the others, also had its place in the stories and beliefs of antiquity. The curious thing is that both the Greeks and the Romans spoke of it, describing it as a wild, pure being with enormous strength. But most interesting of all is its horn, which was not just for show. It was believed to have magical and healing properties. Pliny the Elder, in his Encyclopedia Natural History, mentions the Monoceros as part of his cataloging of the natural world, describing it as an animal with the body of a horse, the head of a deer, the feet of an elephant, and the tail of a wild boar, crowned by a long black horn in the center of its forehead. Nothing to do with Disney's unicorns. Number 8. Onocentaur. The Onocentaur is a mythological creature that combines a man and an ass. Unlike the centaur of Greek mythology, which has the upper body of a man and the lower body of a horse, the Onocentaur has the lower part of a donkey. Not exactly the animal that springs to mind when you think of powerful and noble mythical creatures, is it? But here's the thing. The Onocentaur is not here to impress us with its strength or speed. The Onocentaur symbolizes aspects of human nature that we prefer to ignore or sweep under the carpet. We are talking about lust, stupidity, or lack of control. Ancient art made no bones about it. They depicted the Onocentaur in a way that could serve as a warning. Although the Onocentaur does not figure as prominently in Roman or Greek mythologies as other beings, it gives us clues about how these cultures saw the world and themselves. Perhaps it teaches us to look at our own faults with a little humor and humility, because at the end of the day, we all have a little bit of Onocentaur in us, struggling to find the balance between the human and the animal.
Me so corny!
Number 9. Catoblepas. The catoblepas is like an ox, but not just any ox. It has a body covered in scales, as if nature couldn't decide between making it a fish or a mammal. Now add to that a huge head, so heavy that it almost always hangs to the ground. Can you visualize it already? Because here comes the good part. It is said that if by any chance it looks up and sees you, bam! Its gaze has the power to kill you or turn you to stone. And no, I'm not talking about the famous Medusa, although with that power, they could be distant cousins. And how does an animal with a plant-based diet end up with such lethal power? Well, therein lies the mystery of these ancient legends. The catoblepa lives in swampy areas, away from the curious gaze of travelers, making you wonder what else is hidden in places where human feet rarely tread. Number 10. Aclas. The Aclas is a strange and unique animal. According to Pliny, this creature has such long legs and stiff knee joints that it cannot lie down to sleep, so it must rest against a tree. No napping on the ground like the rest of us. The Aclas had to lean against a tree to rest. Now that's what it means to have trouble sleeping. But there's more. This animal had such a large lower lip that it had to walk backwards when eating to avoid stepping on it. And despite this, the Aclas was a natural runner, fast as the wind despite its stiff joints and unique feeding technique. Number 11. Catas. Catas, for those who don't have him on their mythological creature radar, is not exactly the friendly neighbor you'd like to borrow a cup of sugar from. Rather, he's a giant or monster with a rather interesting pedigree, being the son of Vulcan, the god of fire. And as the son of such a fiery god, Catas had the peculiar ability to exhale fire from his mouth. Not bad for scaring off unwanted visitors, this character lived in a cave on the Aventine Hill, which is one of those 7 legendary hills on which Rome was built. But Catas was not exactly the host of the year. His cave was full of stolen loot from his excursions in the area. Cacas's most famous story begins and ends with an unfriendly encounter with Hercules. It turns out that after stealing the giant Geryon's oxen, Hercules was passing through what would one day be Rome, and our friend Cacas couldn't resist adding a few more oxen to his personal collection. So he promptly stole some of Hercules' oxen, dragging them behind him so as to leave no trace. But of course, this is Hercules, and he wasn't about to let them just take what was his. After an intense search, the sounds of his oxen led him to the cave of Cacas, and there all hell broke loose. Despite Cacas's pyrotechnic powers, Hercules showed him who was the real hero here, freeing the oxen and putting an end to the monster's misdeeds. This is a story the Romans told with pride, as a reminder of the values and virtues they expected to see in their society. Number 12. Caladrius. Caladrius is a bird as white as snow, so pure that its presence alone makes you feel a little more relieved. It is said that this bird has the power to absorb a person's illness just by looking at them. Then, as if that were not enough, it flies off into the sun, taking the illness with it and burning it in the sun's fire. Thus, the patient is cured, freed from his illness, thanks to this incredible mediator between the world of mortals and gods. The presence of this bird in the house of a sick person was considered a good omen, especially if the Caladrius looked at the patient, which indicated that the person would recover. Conversely, if the bird averted its gaze, it was taken as a bad omen, presaging imminent death. Number 13. Fawn. Fawns are a direct vision of the union between humanity and the animal kingdom. A creature that has the torso, arms, and face of a human, but the legs, horns, and ears of a goat. As if a man and a goat have merged into a being that you can't stop looking at. The most famous of these beings is the god Faunus, identified or confused with Pan, the Greek shepherd god, with similar characteristics. Faunus is the protector of shepherds and their flocks, the patron of fertility and peace in the fields and valleys. The Romans venerated him, holding festivals in his honor, full of music, dance, and, well, a bit of festive mayhem. Faunus kept the balance, ensuring that life in the countryside flourished. Fawns, and especially Faunus himself, were not only serious and protective, they had a playful, almost mischievous side. They were also known for their somewhat seductive encounters, to put it mildly. Come on, they were hotter than a heater. They are credited with the invention of the flute, an instrument that shows their love of music, and with which they can convey both joy and fear, depending on their mood or intentions. I have left out of this video the Greek creatures, because we already have a video talking only about them. Subscribe, like the video, and comment what you think. Your support is essential for this to go ahead. Thanks, and see you in next week's video.